Ready for a deep dive? We're tackling Think and Grow Rich today. This book's a classic, and for good reason, right? It promises to unlock those secrets to wealth and success that we're all looking for.
It really is practically a cultural phenomenon at this point, and it stood the test of time. And, it's not about get-rich-quick schemes, which is refreshing.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It is. Hill spent decades interviewing hundreds of successful people, trying to understand the patterns, the common threads. We're talking Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, all these giants of that time.
Exactly. It's like he cracked the code.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that jumps out is this idea of burning desire. Like, it's not just wishing or hoping, it's that deep down, gotta have it kind of fire.
It's about transforming that vague want into a really crystal clear, laser-focused target.
Oh, absolutely.
He tells this great story about Edwin Barnes, really stuck with me, this one. Barnes was absolutely dead set on working with Thomas Edison. And not just for him, but with him. Barnes had this vision of himself as Edison's business partner, not just another employee.
And that's exactly what happened. It's funny because that burning desire Barnes had, we all have it within us. It's about tapping into that and letting it drive you forward. So I'm curious, what's that one thing that you've been maybe wanting but haven't fully committed to?
Think about it as we dive deeper, okay? Because Hill doesn't stop at desire. He also talks about the power of persistence. Remember the story of author Fannie Hurst?
Oh, absolutely. 36 rejections. Can you imagine? 36 rejections from the Saturday Evening Post. Most people would have given up, but not her.
Talk about resilience.
Unwavering belief in herself and her work. And bam, best-selling author. It's a good reminder that success is often like just beyond that point where you want to give up. It makes you think about those times you might have given up too soon.
Oh, I know it. It's like that story of Darby, the insurance salesman who learned persistence in a really tough way. The guy literally stopped digging for gold 3 feet from striking it rich.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Talk about a tough break.
Oh, man, that's brutal. But he took that experience, right? He turned it into fuel for his next venture.
He did. He learned pushing through setbacks, not giving in, was the key.
And look at the results. Ended up selling over $1 million worth of insurance every year. It's like Hill says, persistence is that iron quality of all successful people. But there's another crucial element here, imagination. And Hill differentiates between two types, synthetic and creative.
It's an important distinction.
It is. Synthetic imagination is like rearranging existing ideas, like remixing a song or something. But creative imagination, that's where you're tapping into something deeper, something truly new, truly original.
He uses that metaphor of the enchanted kettle. Think about Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah.
Started as this simple formula, but with imagination, that formula became a global empire.
Exactly. It's about taking that idea, that kernel, and just letting your mind really explore all its possibilities. No limits. How can you apply those two types of imagination to your own goals? What would it look like if you really let your mind run wild?
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Hill also talks about the mastermind principle, this idea that surrounding yourself with the right people, it can make or break you.
Absolutely.
Right.
He really emphasizes that no one achieves significant wealth alone. It's about building that network, those brilliant minds, people who can offer advice, support, and honestly just push you to be your best.
Just look at Henry Ford. You've got Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, Luther Burbank in his circle, all these incredible minds. Talk about a power group.
And their collective genius, you can't deny, it played a role in Ford's success. I mean, they inspired each other, they challenged each other, and ultimately achieved more together. It's a powerful reminder about collaboration,
Absolutely. Now, get ready for this next one. It's a bit unconventional. Hill talks about the importance of sex transmutation.
Yeah. This is one that tends to raise some eyebrows, but bear with us, all right? It's worth exploring.
Yeah.
So Hill's argument is that sexual energy is this powerful force, right? But instead of just, purely physical gratification, it can be channeled into other areas of life.
So instead of just seeking the physical, it's about harnessing that energy and maybe redirecting it toward creativity, toward leadership, achieving your goals, things like that.
Exactly. He uses the example of highly successful salesmen who, often without even realizing it, are tapping into this principle. They project this certain charisma, this influence that just draws people in, and Hill argues that's connected to this transmuted energy.
It's interesting. It's definitely an intriguing perspective.
Oh.
Now let's switch gears for a moment and talk about something we all face, and it's fear. Hill identifies 6 basic fears that can really hold people back. Poverty, criticism, ill health, Loss of love, old age, and death.
Big ones.
Right. Big ones.
And he argues that these fears, they're states of mind, they're not these unchangeable realities. They can be overcome.
He even tells this story about a death row inmate who found peace by consciously choosing to face his fate with a positive attitude. Powerful stuff.
It's a powerful reminder that no matter what, we always have a choice in how we respond to things, you know. We're not victims of our circumstances. We have the power to choose our thoughts, and in doing so, shape our reality.
Absolutely. And Hill's advice on overcoming fear, it's actually incredibly practical. Like, he really emphasizes the importance of facing those fears head on, taking action.
Yeah.
So we're back, ready to unpack these 6 fears.
Yeah, these fears Hill's talking about, they're fascinating. Even though they're internal, they can have such a huge impact on what we actually do in the world.
Absolutely. Like, let's start with the fear of poverty. I think we've all felt that at some point. But Hill's saying it's more than just, like, not having enough money, right?
It is. It's a mindset. He argues that poverty and riches, they can't coexist. You have to choose. It's about choosing abundance, both in how you think and what you do.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it either. He talks about how money madness, this, like, relentless chase for wealth without a real purpose, it can actually lead to unhappiness.
Right, and I think that's a really important point. It's like Hill is advocating for a more holistic approach to success, you know? Money is important, but it's not the only thing.
Finding that balance. Now, how about the fear of criticism? Oh, man, I think we've all been there, hesitant to put ourselves out there because we're worried about what people might think.
Oh, absolutely. That fear can be so paralyzing. Hill gives examples of how it damages relationships, even stops people from going after their dreams.
He really does. He talks about how some people stay stuck in bad jobs or even relationships because they're so scared of what other people will say if they make a change.
It's sad, but it's true. But Hill, he challenges us to break free from that, to live authentically, even if it means, you know, facing some disapproval along the way.
It's easier said than done, but so important. And speaking of overcoming limitations, Hill challenges us on aging, too. The fear of old age. That's a big one, especially in our culture.
It is. Isn't it interesting, though? Like, instead of seeing aging as this thing to be scared of, he frames it as a time for wisdom, understanding.
He even calls old age a blessing. It's about shifting our perspective, seeing the value in each stage of life. Now, fear of ill health, that one's big for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure, especially these days, right? There's so much information out there, and misinformation, it's overwhelming.
It really is. But Hill's point is that all that worry, all that negativity, it can actually weaken our immune system.
That mind-body connection is so powerful. Positive emotions, you know, love, joy, they can boost our well-being. And Hill even talks about a case where this young man, completely heartbroken, physically ill, and then he falls in love again and completely recovers.
Wow. Talk about the power of the mind. Okay, let's talk about loss, the fear of losing a loved one. It's primal, right?
Absolutely. It's deeply ingrained in us, this need for connection, for belonging. Hill says that this fear of loss, it can manifest as jealousy, possessiveness, even destructive behaviors.
He even connects it back to the dawn of civilization, talking about how men, back then, always fearing the loss of their partner to another.
And it's not just romantic relationships, it's any kind of deep connection that we hold dear.
So true. And finally, the big one, the fear of death. Probably the most universal fear there is.
Hill takes a really interesting approach here. He doesn't pretend to know what happens after death, but he challenges us to really question our fear.
He argues that so much of that fear comes from, ignorance, societal conditioning. He even brings in scientific concepts, talking about how energy can't be destroyed, only transformed.
It's a mind-bending concept. He's saying that even if our physical bodies cease to exist, that energy that animates us, it might continue on in some other form.
So it's not necessarily an ending, but a transformation. Now, Hill also mentions this seventh, susceptibility to negative influences. What's that all about?
It's about your circle, basically. He's saying that the people you surround yourself with, it matters. Negative people, negative influences, it can seep into your subconscious and hold you back.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. Be mindful of the company you keep and the information you consume, too.
So true. Now, Hill doesn't just point out problems, he offers solutions. He talks about this power of decision as a way to combat fear and negativity.
He does. In decision, he says, it's a breeding ground for worry. Making a firm decision, even if it's hard, it brings clarity, focus.
He uses the example of that death row inmate again, how he found a sense of peace in accepting his fate and choosing how he was going to face it.
Such a powerful example. Even in the face of the unknown, right? Choosing how we respond, it can bring a sense of peace.
It's true. Now let's get into some of the, I don't know, more mind-bending concepts that Hill explores.
Yeah.
He talks about the subconscious mind, this connection to what he calls infinite intelligence.
This is where Hill gets a little out there, I have to admit. But he describes the subconscious as a kind of bridge between our conscious thoughts and then this higher power.
And he even says that we can communicate with this infinite intelligence through our subconscious by planting desires, beliefs into it.
It's about the power of belief, of faith. He even calls faith the chemical that, when mixed with prayer, can connect us to something bigger.
So we're talking about like manifestation here, putting our intentions out into the universe.
Yeah, I mean, essentially. Hill believed our thoughts had a real impact, that they could influence the world around us. He gives examples of people like Mahatma Gandhi who, seemed to possess this extraordinary power through their unwavering faith.
Okay, so some serious universal energy stuff here. And then he goes even further, talking about the sixth sense, like this intuitive knowing that goes beyond our five physical senses.
It's like that gut feeling, that inner voice. He believed that we could all develop this sixth sense.
He even suggests that this sixth sense might be the point where our minds are actually connecting to this universal mind,
Yeah.
this like cosmic consciousness.
Now that's a thought, right? But Hill also gives some practical advice for, actually accessing this sixth sense.
Yeah, like creating this imaginary cabinet of advisors, great minds from history.
It sounds wild, but it's about visualization. Hill himself, he imagined interacting with these figures, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Edison, drawing on their wisdom.
And he claims those meetings, they became so real, he could practically feel their presence.
Which shows just how powerful our minds are, that ability to blur those lines between imagination and reality. But he also cautions against relying too much on this technique.
Yeah, he stresses that the true power, it lies within us. External inspiration, it's great, but we have to cultivate our own inner strength and wisdom too.
Exactly. Ultimately, Hill's message is about mastering our own minds. It's about harnessing our thoughts and beliefs to create the life that we want.
And a huge part of that is understanding and mastering fear. Those 6 basic fears that we talked about.
It's not just about thinking positive thoughts. It's about confronting, dismantling those deeply rooted fears that are holding us back.
Exactly, because Hill believes that fear is really at the root of so much suffering and failure.
He does.
He argues that we have this right to control our thoughts, to reject any fear-based belief that's limiting our potential.
Absolutely. He uses the example of Thomas Edison. Can you imagine the fear and doubt he must have faced when everyone told him he couldn't build a machine to record the human voice?
It's incredible when you think about it. And yet he persisted, and he invented the phonograph, changed the world of sound forever.
That's what choosing faith over fear looks like. Hill argues that successful people, they don't necessarily have fewer fears. They just refuse to let fear control them.
It's like Henry Ford saying he'd belt the earth with dependable motor cars. People probably thought he was nuts, but that belief in his vision, it fueled him to revolutionize the world,
It did. We all have minds, Hill says, but it's the mastery of our minds that truly sets us apart.
He even has this whole list of those alibi phrases we use to justify our lack of success. If I could just get started, or if I only had a break. He's calling us out on our excuses.
He is, challenging us to take responsibility, right? Stop blaming those external circumstances and really recognize the power we have within.
It's a powerful message. We are not victims of fate, but creators of our own destiny.
He really is. It's about taking control. And Hill actually gives us some pretty practical tools to help us do that. Like, remember that self-analysis questionnaire he talks about?
Oh yeah, where he's encouraging us to really look at our strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. It's like holding up a mirror, taking stock of who you are, what you're good at, maybe where you're holding yourself back.
He even suggests asking someone you trust for an honest opinion, someone who can give you that outside perspective.
Right. Because sometimes we don't see it ourselves, right? It's about being open to feedback, even if it's a little tough to hear sometimes.
Always be growing, right?
Exactly. Continuous self-improvement. And, beyond that personal development stuff, Hill also dives into the whole question of opportunity. Where do we find it? How do we create it?
And he starts by reminding us how much freedom and opportunity we really have, especially here in America.
He does. He talks about how no matter your background, you have the potential to achieve success. We've got access to so many resources, education, technology. He even uses the example of, a good breakfast.
That's so funny. He really does break it down. How much goes into that cup of coffee and that piece of toast you have every morning?
Right. And it highlights the power of, organized capital, the way
Yeah.
it connects people, resources, creates this whole network of opportunity.
But he's not naive about it. He acknowledges the criticisms of capitalism too, especially when times are tough.
He does. He talks about how it's easy to blame like Wall Street or big business for our problems. But we often forget how important capital is to creating jobs, prosperity.
He's not afraid of those tough conversations. He even talks about government relief, this idea that people shouldn't expect handouts without contributing something in return.
Yeah, he's a big believer in personal responsibility, earning your success through hard work, adding value.
No free lunch, right.
Yeah, great.
But he's not saying everyone needs to be a millionaire. It's about finding your own way to contribute, to create something of value.
And he uses those interesting examples, like reminding us how much we spend on things like lipstick and chewing gum.
Right. And it's not even about those products themselves. It's about the people behind them, the jobs created, the income generated.
It's about seeing the world as full of possibility for those who are willing to work hard to innovate.
So how do we tap into that? Hill emphasizes what he calls the law of economics.
Yeah, the law of economics, kind of a mouthful, but he describes it as like this unbreakable law, like gravity. It governs how wealth is created and distributed.
It's that idea you can't get something for nothing. Right. Wealth is built by providing value, offering something that others are willing to pay for.
And he warns against trying to cheat the system. Shortcuts, he says, they only lead to failure in the end.
It's about building something lasting, based on honesty, hard work, service.
Exactly. Creating something that improves lives, solves problems, maybe brings a little joy to the world.
And the rewards of that,
Yeah.
of building genuine value, so much greater than any short-term gains from, cutting corners or being unethical, playing the long game.
It is. And Hill actually offers some really practical advice on, navigating all this, like making decisions quickly, decisively.
He's all about trusting your gut, taking action.
Right. No more overthinking, no more procrastinating. He says that indecision, it just breeds doubt and fear. But he also says, don't be reckless.
Find that balance. Listen, learn, and then take action when it feels right.
Exactly. He also talks about the power of developing like a really strong magnetic personality.
Oh, yeah. That it factor
Yeah.
that draws people in.
Yeah, qualities like courage, self-control, kindness, a sense of justice.
He even suggests that a healthy sex drive, channeled correctly, of course, can contribute to charisma and enthusiasm, add to your magnetism.
It's fascinating, right? Like our energy, our vitality, it can attract success.
It's about harnessing all aspects of ourselves, even our sexuality, and using that energy to create a life that we love.
Absolutely. And ultimately, Hill reminds us that our thoughts, they are the architects of our reality. He says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, that our thoughts have this magnetic force and they attract experiences that match our dominant beliefs.
So we have to be mindful of those thoughts, choose to focus on the positive, and make sure our beliefs are aligned with our desires.
Exactly. Powerful stuff.
It really is. So we've covered a lot of ground here, but if there's one thing to take away from Think and Grow Rich, it's this. You have the power to achieve anything you can conceive and believe.
Absolutely. Cultivate that burning desire. Push through those challenges and face those fears head on.
Master your mind, harness that energy, and align your thoughts with your dreams. He's given us the roadmap. It's up to us to take those steps. Choose faith over fear and build the life you truly want.
It's more than a self-help book, it's a call to action. Step into your power and become the master of your own destiny.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. If your thoughts shape your reality, what thoughts will you choose today?